You know that feeling, right? The one where your palms start sweating and your heart just pounds in your chest right before you have to walk on stage. Your brain is absolutely screaming at you that you're in mortal danger. But you're not. This is your brain having a high-resolution, full-blown meltdown over a pretty low-resolution threat. So today we are going to dive into why your brain's ancient alarm system is basically sabotaging your modern life, and more importantly, how we can install a whole new protocol for risk.
I mean, we've all been there, haven't we? That intense, full-body alarm that goes off just before a big presentation or, right before you hit send on a kind of risky email. Your body is literally getting ready to fight a saber-toothed tiger, but the actual threat, it's just a PowerPoint deck. This is your ancient wiring in action, and honestly, it's running a program that is dangerously out of date.
Now here's where it gets really fascinating. Look at the contrast. While your body is freaking out over public speaking, it stays completely silent about a far more lethal risk: the slow, quiet, invisible danger of just stagnating. 10 years in a job that's crushing your soul, your heart rate is perfectly normal. You feel safe. And that, right there, is a profound, profound miscalculation.
Look, this isn't just you being cautious or prudent. No, this is a specific cognitive error. It's like a bug in your programming, an architectural failure in how your brain calculates odds. Let's call it a probability identity mismatch. Basically, your brain blows short-term social threats way out of proportion and completely, totally ignores the slow-motion existential ones that truly define your life.
And this mismatch is especially severe for a type of person we can call the high-resolution sentinel. This is for those of us with minds that just can't help but overthink and simulate every single possible outcome in vivid, sometimes painful detail. Your internal alarm system? It's perfectly tuned to help you survive in a prehistoric jungle, but it is completely unequipped to navigate the quiet, creeping risks of the modern world.
So, let's pop the hood and look at the hardware itself. Why on earth does our brain get this so profoundly wrong? Well, it's because your brain is a simulation machine, and it's almost too good at its job. It's built to prioritize the intensity of a potential threat over its actual real-world impact.
Okay, so biologically, your risk assessment is run by a part of your brain called the amygdala, and it is not subtle. It sees the world in black and white, safe or deadly. So when you just imagine looking foolish, your mind simulates it so vividly that your amygdala triggers this powerful physical feeling of dread. This is what we call the intensity bias. That feeling is so real, your brain treats a tiny possibility as an absolute 100% certainty.
In this formula, it brilliantly illustrates the kind of math your brain is running in the background. Think about it. Because you process the world in like 8K resolution, the visual fidelity of your mental simulations is always sky high. The emotional intensity gets cranked way up, so even when the logical probability of a disaster is basically zero, your internal calculation is just screaming that the risk is absolute.
So what's the bottom line here? The crucial point is that your advanced cognitive hardware, it actually becomes a liability. Your brilliant, high-resolution mind gets so busy overanalyzing the tiny mosquito of social embarrassment that it completely misses the silent, life-altering iceberg of stagnation sitting right in front of you.
Okay, so what's the real-world consequence of all of this? Well, this evolutionary hangover, this faulty wiring, it creates a state of modern paralysis. It builds what you could call an intellectual prison, where the walls are quite literally made of your own fear.
And this whole system exists for a really simple evolutionary reason. I mean, for our ancestors, the cost of a false positive, getting scared by the wind rustling in the grass, was minimal. A little wasted energy, no big deal. But the cost of a false negative, ignoring a rustle that was actually a predator, well, that was catastrophic. Game over. So we are hardwired to overreact.
But today, that very same survival mechanism traps us. Because you can vividly imagine the potential downside of any action, you automatically default to the zero action path. You tell yourself you're being strategic or you're just waiting for the right moment, but really, you're just waiting for the fear to go away. And guess what? It won't. You've started to mistake inaction for safety.
And the real cost of this zero action path, it's absolutely staggering. Every single day you spend waiting, you are actively losing your single most precious, non-renewable asset. And it's not money, it's time. We can call this your temporal capital.
and it's just draining away while you're busy focusing on all the wrong threats.
Okay, we've spent enough time diagnosing the faulty wiring. Now it's time for the escape plan. We need to manually install a new operating system, a framework we're going to call the Risk Inversion Protocol.
Now, this isn't about somehow eliminating fear. That's just impossible. It's about recalibrating your response to it. This is a practical, 4-step framework that you can actually use to manually override that faulty alarm system and start moving towards the things that actually matter.
Let's break this down. First up, the stagnation audit. You have to make the quiet risk of doing nothing loud. Use that 8K brain of yours to vividly, intensely visualize what your life will look like in 5 years if you stay on this exact path. Really feel it. Next, the 10-10-10 filter. When that spike of fear hits, just ask yourself, will this matter in 10 minutes? What about 10 months? How about 10 years? This simple question forces your logical brain to kick in and shrinks the perceived size of the threat. Third, the tuition reframe. Stop thinking of potential failures as risk. Start calling them tuition, the price you pay for a valuable lesson. This shifts your entire mindset from trying to avoid loss to actively acquiring data. And finally, label the alarm. When you feel that physical panic, that racing heart, literally say out loud to yourself, this is a false positive. By naming it, you create distance. You stop being the fear and start becoming the one who notices the fear.
So the crucial point of all this, the whole shebang, is a fundamental shift in your identity. You stop being a prisoner of your own biology, and you start becoming the calm, curious observer of it. You see the alarms going off, you acknowledge them, but you no longer have to obey them blindly.
And that really leaves us with this one final question to think about. In your own life, right now, what's the distracting, noisy spider? And what's the silent, incoming tide that you're ignoring? Where are you really aiming that incredible, high-resolution focus of yours?
Your high-resolution mind is not a curse. It's a superpower. It's a tool that's meant to guide you toward greatness, not to keep you paralyzed and shivering in the corner. The goal isn't to silence the alarm. It's to stop obeying it. Be the observer. Okay, have you ever noticed this? You're about to give a presentation and your body acts like you're about to fight a tiger. But the idea of spending a whole decade in a dead-end job? Crickets. It feels like our internal alarm system is just fundamentally broken. So we're going to dive into why your brain is so good at fearing all the wrong things, and more importantly, how you can start to build a better risk architecture for yourself.
Just look at this contrast. It's pretty wild. On one side, you have a small social risk, right? Giving a speech. And it triggers this massive, high-resolution fear response. I mean, your heart's pounding, your palms are sweating. It is a full-body code red alert. But then, on the other side, you have a truly life-altering risk, like a decade of just stagnating. And what happens? Almost nothing. Your heart rate is totally normal. You feel, ironically, completely safe. This isn't just a quirk, it's a critical system failure.
So that really brings us to the big question we're tackling here. Why is your brain's risk detector so spectacularly broken? Why is it perfectly calibrated to survive a jungle that we don't live in anymore, while it completely ignores the real, modern dangers? Well, it turns out the answer is that it's a feature, not a bug, of your own incredibly powerful hardware. So let's get into what we can call the simulation bug. See, the problem isn't that your brain is cowardly or weak. It's the exact opposite. Your mental simulation machine is it's too good. It's literally a victim of its own high-resolution capabilities. And at the very heart of this bug is a little piece of hardware called the amygdala. Now, this is your brain's ancient alarm system, and you gotta understand, it's super primitive. It only thinks in 2 modes, safe or deadly. That's it. When it gets triggered, it creates what's called a somatic marker. That's the real physical feeling of dread in your gut. But here's the crucial part. The amygdala has zero concept of abstract, long-term risks like opportunity cost or, a life on Lyft. And that physical reaction, that dread, leads directly to this cognitive glitch we call intensity bias. So when your powerful brain simulates getting rejected socially, the amygdala lights up and triggers that physical feeling. And that feeling can be so intense, so real, that your brain just completely overrides logic. It treats the feeling of disaster as a 100% probability of disaster, even if the actual stakes are incredibly small. You can almost picture it like an equation running in the background in your head. Your perceived risk is your emotional intensity times your visual fidelity, all divided by the actual logical probability.
So when the numbers on top, the intensity of the emotion, and the vividness of the image are huge, that tiny little logical probability on the bottom, it doesn't stand a chance. It gets completely washed out. And for anyone with a highly imaginative or intelligent mind, what some people call an orchid brain, this effect is just dialed up to 11. You literally process the world in 8K. Your mental simulation of looking stupid is so vivid, so emotionally charged, that even a 0.01% chance of it happening feels like a 100% dead certainty. And that, right there, is the core of the whole mismatch.
So, what's the end result of all this? We become experts at over-predicting the cost of a spike, a brief moment of discomfort or embarrassment, and at the same time, we tragically underpredict the cost of the flat line, a lifetime of quiet inaction. We actually start to believe that the safe path is the best one. Let me give you a metaphor. Think of your incredible brain, your high-resolution mind, as this amazing, high-precision instrument. But because of this bug, you're using this high-precision radar to obsessively track a tiny little mosquito, that small social fear that's just buzzing around your head. And while you're completely focused on that mosquito, you are totally blind to the silent, massive iceberg of stagnation that is sitting directly in your path. The mosquito feels loud and urgent. The iceberg is quiet and abstract. So your amygdala just ignores it until it's way too late.
And all of this creates something you could call an intellectual prison. You're hardwired for loss aversion. You fear losing way more than you value gaining. You can see the 8K downside of any action in perfect, terrifying detail. So what do? To avoid that feeling of fear, you choose the zero action path. And you justify it. You tell yourself you're just waiting for more data, when the reality is you are burning your most precious, non-renewable asset, your temporal capital, your time.
Okay, but here's the good news. You are not stuck in this prison. We can build a new system. Let's talk about installing the risk inversion protocol. Think of it as a new software framework designed to manually override that faulty alarm and finally recalibrate your fear response.
This protocol has 4 really clear, actionable steps you can start using like today. The stagnation audit, the 10-10-10 filter, the tuition reframe, and labeling the alarm. So let's break them down one by one. First up, the stagnation audit. This is all about making that quiet risk loud. Every week, maybe every Sunday, you force yourself to ask, what is the real, tangible, biological, and cognitive cost if I do absolutely nothing for another 6 months? You need to render that future in the same 8K resolution you use for your small fears. You have to make that iceberg visible.
Okay, next. When you feel that jolt of fear about some small risk, you immediately apply the 10-10-10 filter. Ask yourself, will this matter in 10 minutes? Probably. Will it matter in 10 months? Unlikely. How about 10 years? Almost certainly not. This super simple exercise engages your logical brain, your prefrontal cortex, and it lets you manually override the amygdala's short-sighted panic attack.
Step 3 is a powerful language shift. It's the tuition reframe. You have to stop labeling potential failures as risks. Start calling them tuition. If you try something and it doesn't work out, you haven't lost anything. You've just paid a small tuition fee for a valuable lesson in resilience. And you've acquired new data. This completely shifts your mindset from loss aversion to data acquisition.
And finally, step 4, labeling the alarm. This is huge. The next time your heart starts pounding before you send that email or make that phone call, don't just feel the fear. Step back and observe it. Say to yourself, out loud if you need to, this is my high-resolution simulation triggering a false positive. My hardware is overreacting. By doing this, you're not just managing fear anymore. You're fundamentally changing your entire relationship with it. You are shifting from being a victim of your own biology to becoming the observer of it, taking conscious, deliberate control of your own internal architecture.
So, if you take one thing away, let it be this. Stop fearing the spider while the tide is coming in. Stop letting the small, visible, skittering fears gobble up all your attention while the silent, massive, and truly dangerous reality of stagnation slowly rises all around you.
And I'll leave you with this final thought. Your high-resolution mind is an incredible gift. So you have to ask yourself, is its purpose to create these vivid phantoms that just keep you shivering in a corner? Or is it meant to be the very tool you use to chart a course toward a great and meaningful life?
The choice is yours. You've got the protocol, you have the awareness. Now it's time to be the observer.
All right, let's get right into it. We're going to talk about this weird glitch in our programming. It's all about how some of the sharpest, most analytical minds out there are often the ones who get modern risk completely wrong, focusing on tiny imaginary threats while completely ignoring the monumental dangers right in front of them.
I mean, seriously, why does giving a presentation feel like you're about to be mauled by a tiger? You've been there, right? You're about to speak up in a meeting or maybe just send a risky email and your body just goes into full-on DEFCON 1. Your heart is hammering in your chest, your palms get all sweaty, it feels like you are in mortal danger. It's an absolutely high-fidelity 8K level response to what is, in reality, a very low-stakes threat. And this is where the mismatch just becomes so obvious. We have this massive, physical freakout over a momentary social risk. But what about the silent, invisible risk of staying in a soul-crushing job for 10 years? In that situation, what's your body doing? Nothing. Your heart rate is perfectly calm. You feel totally safe, but really, are you?
So this brings us to the core of the problem. What we call being cautious is often something else entirely. It's a deep architectural failure in our internal odds-making. It's like we're all running on this ancient, outdated software that was calibrated for a world that just doesn't exist anymore.
And this flaw has a name. It's the probability-identity mismatch. It sounds fancy, but it's simple. It's that moment when the tiny chance of a small social mistake feels like a direct, full-on assault on your very identity. Your brain literally can't tell the difference. And look, this isn't about being prudent or careful. It's a straight-up miscalculation, and it's what keeps so many of us completely and totally trapped.
Okay, so the big question is, why? Why on earth are we wired this way? To get the answer, we have to go back, way back. We need to look at the deep-seated evolutionary programming that built our internal alarm system in the first place.
I want you to imagine our ancient ancestors for a second. In every tribe, you probably had a sentinel, and that sentinel had one job, and one job only: spot the single thing that could wipe everyone out. This baked a deep, powerful bias into our DNA for what we now call loss aversion. It's this gut instinct to focus only on what could go wrong, and believe me, we are all still running that same exact code today.
And when you look at the survival math, it makes perfect sense, right? A false positive meant you jumped at a shadow. The cost? Maybe you looked a little silly for a second. No big deal. But a false negative, that's when you ignore the rustle in the bushes that turns out to be a saber-toothed tiger. The cost there is, well, it's everything. It's infinite. So evolution took the safe bet. It hardwired us to overreact to anything that could be a threat, because that was literally the only way to survive.
So, fast forward to today. That ancient hardwiring shows up in this kind of messed up risk formula our brain uses. The risk you feel has almost nothing to do with cold, hard logic. Nope. It's this gut punch of emotional intensity, multiplied by how vividly you can picture it all going wrong, all divided by the actual logical chance of it happening.
Let's unpack that a bit. That emotional intensity, that's your amygdala talking. It's the ancient lizard brain part of you, your threat detector. And here's the thing, it doesn't do nuance. It only operates in a binary, safe or deadly. So when you just imagine failing, your amygdala doesn't see a simulation. It sees a real threat, and it treats that possibility as a 100% certain catastrophe.
And then you've got the other part of the equation, visual fidelity. And if you're someone with a really high-resolution mind, this is your curse. Your mental movie of looking stupid, it's not some blurry home video. It's in full 8K surround sound. It feels so real, so detailed, that it completely steamrolls any rational thought about how small the actual stakes are. That inner sentinel of yours? Yeah, its fidelity is cranked to 11, always. This quote just nails it perfectly. You have this incredible, high-precision radar, and you're using it to track a mosquito. All that brain power, all that analytical skill gets laser-focused on the tiny, buzzing annoyance of social embarrassment. And while you're doing that, you're completely missing the massive, silent iceberg of a life unlived, drifting right towards you.
So, what's the big deal? What are the real-world consequences of this faulty programming? Well, it's not just about feeling a little anxious now and then. It's way bigger than that. It's about ending up locked inside a prison you built yourself, a prison of total inaction.
This is the intellectual prison. It's a trap, because your brilliant mind can paint such a perfect 8K picture of everything that could possibly go wrong, you naturally default to the zero-action path. It feels safer.
You tell yourself, oh, I'm just waiting for more data, or I'm just perfecting the plan. But let's be honest, you're really just waiting for the fear to go away. And here's the kicker, it won't. That fear is a feature, not a bug, of your high-resolution brain. It is never gonna leave.
This means we have to do a complete 180 in our thinking. We have to start seeing the safe path for what it really is, the single most dangerous path you can take. That feeling of safety, it's an illusion. Inaction is not a neutral move. It's an active choice, and it's a slow-motion catastrophe. Why? Because every single day you spend waiting on that so-called safe path, you're actively burning through your most valuable, totally irreplaceable asset, and that's your temporal capital, your time. It's the only thing you can spend but can never, ever earn back.
And this constant inaction leads to the only real danger for a mind like yours. It's what we call the death of the lens. It's your intellect slowly withering away from a lack of challenge. You know, everyone tells you to listen to your gut, but your gut is a radar for past patterns, not a guide for future growth. When it comes to taking a leap, that gut feeling is usually just a scared animal trying to stay safe inside its cage.
All right. So how do we get out? How do we break free from this prison and actually recalibrate that faulty internal risk calculator? We need a system, a practical framework, and that's exactly what the risk inversion protocol is.
So this protocol is basically a toolkit with 4 specific tools designed to help you override that scared animal inside. You've got the stagnation audit, which is all about making the silent danger of doing nothing really, really loud. Then the 10-10-10 filter, to help you shrink your immediate fears down to size. Third, and this one's huge, is the tuition reframe, which completely flips how you think about failure. And finally, labeling the alarm, which is how you learn to see your brain's false alarms for what they are, instead of letting them run your life.
Honestly, that tuition reframe, it's a total game changer. The second you truly get that the safe path is the catastrophic one, all those little scary risks, they suddenly look different. They stop being risks and they start looking like cheap tuition. See, if you try something and it doesn't work out, you didn't fail. You just paid a small fee for a valuable piece of data. This shifts your whole mindset from loss aversion to data acquisition.
So the whole point of all this, the end goal, is to make a fundamental shift in your role. It's about evolving from being that jumpy, reactive sentinel who sees threats everywhere to becoming a calm, conscious, strategic observer of your own mind.
And this just puts it all into perfect perspective. Your powerful, high-resolution mind is an incredible gift, but you gotta aim it at the right targets. You have to stop letting it fixate on the tiny, harmless spider of social anxiety, while the real, silent danger, the tide of wasted time, is slowly rising all around you.
So I'll leave you with this question to really think about. Take a hard look at your own life, your career, your goals, and ask yourself, what is the one safe path you're on right now that is actually your most dangerous?
You ever notice how your body's internal alarm system seems, well, completely backwards? How it just screams mortal danger over a tiny social risk, but stays totally silent when you're facing the biggest threat of all, stagnation? Well, today, we're going to dismantle those false alarms. We're going to install a new way of thinking, a protocol designed to retune your brain so you can finally stop fearing the wrong things and start going after what actually matters.
So just look at this. On one side, you've got something like public speaking. It triggers this full-blown, high-def physiological response, right? Your heart pounds, you sweat, it feels absolutely deadly. And on the other side, the slow, creeping risk of just staying put in a life that's not right for you. And your body's response? Crickets. Nothing. It feels safe. This is the crazy paradox we're tackling today. Your internal alarm is freaking out about a mosquito while a tidal wave is building behind you.
Now, this isn't some personal flaw. It's more like an architectural failure in our wiring. For those of us with what you might call a high-resolution mind, a brain that vividly imagines every single little detail, the fear of a simple social mistake can feel like a direct threat to your very identity. But the far more lethal risk, the risk of a life unlived, it's too slow. It's too quiet for our ancient alarm system to even pick it up on the radar.
Okay, so let's pop the hood. Why exactly is our alarm system, this ancient piece of hardware, so completely wrong for the modern world? Let's get into it.
Here's the thing. For a really imaginative mind, your greatest strength is also kind of your biggest obstacle.
Your brain is a simulation machine that is almost too good. I mean, it creates these hyper-realistic 8K mental movies of you failing, of you looking stupid, and they feel so incredibly real that they just hijack your entire system.
Let's break down that hardware, shall we? First off, your whole risk assessment is run by the amygdala. This is an ancient part of your brain that only sees two settings: safe or deadly. It doesn't do nuance. So when you picture that social mistake, it triggers these intense physical feelings of dread. These are called somatic markers. And because that feeling is so powerful, your brain falls for something called intensity bias. It treats the feeling of risk as a 100% chance of total disaster.
And here it is. This is the crazy internal math that's going on inside your head. Your perceived risk is basically the emotional intensity of the feeling times the visual fidelity of your mental movie, all divided by the actual tiny logical probability of it happening. For a high-res mind, those first two numbers are always cranked up to 11. So it doesn't matter how small the real risk is, your internal calculator just screams catastrophe.
This is probably the perfect way to put it. You have this incredible mental hardware, this super high-precision radar, and it is completely obsessed with tracking the tiny, buzzing, immediate threats, the mosquitoes, all while this massive, silent, life-changing risk, the iceberg of stagnation, is sitting right in front of you, completely invisible to your ancient system.
You know, this whole system made perfect sense for our ancestors. For them, the cost of a false positive, getting spooked by a little rustle in the grass that was just the wind, was super low. You just felt a bit silly for a second. But the cost of a false negative, ignoring that same rustle when it was actually a predator, well, that was everything. So we are literally hardwired for intense loss aversion. We're built to overreact to potential bad stuff to stay alive.
But here's the massive problem. That old survival trait has become a trap. It's an intellectual prison. Because you can vividly picture the 8K downside of any action you might take, you almost always choose the zero action path. You tell yourself, oh, I'll just wait for the fear to go away. But it's never going to. That fear is a feature of your high-res mind. The safe path has become the most dangerous one you can take.
Okay, so we've diagnosed the hardware problem. Now it is time for the system upgrade. Let's install the risk inversion protocol. This is the framework you can use to override that ancient programming and start actually architecting your own life.
All right, our system upgrade comes in 4 parts. We've got the stagnation audit, the 10-10-10 filter, something called the tuition reframe, and finally, labeling the alarm. Let's walk through how each of these actually works. Step 1 is all about making that invisible risk visible. The idea is to do this every Sunday. It's a cost of no action audit. You ask yourself that exact question on the screen, and then you visualize the answer. And that same vivid 8K resolution your brain uses for all those tiny fears. The whole point here is to make the quiet risk of stagnation loud. Next up, when you feel totally paralyzed by some small risk, you pull out the 10-10-10 filter. Ask yourself, is this awkward email or social gaffe going to matter in 10 minutes? What about 10 months from now? Or 10 years? It's such a simple process, but it forces your logical brain, your prefrontal cortex, to grab the steering wheel and manually override your amygdala's short-term, high-intensity panic attack.
Now, step 3 is a really powerful mental shift. You have to stop calling it risk. You're going to start calling it tuition. So instead of focusing on what you might lose, you focus on what you're going to learn. So what if you send that email and get no reply? You haven't failed. You just paid $0 for a really valuable lesson in resilience. It's about data acquisition, not loss aversion. And finally, when you feel that heart-pounding panic before some small task, you use this exact script. Seriously, say it out loud or just in your head. This is my high-res simulation triggering a false positive. My hardware is overreacting. Just the simple act of labeling it changes everything. It shifts you from being a victim of the feeling to being the observer of the mechanism.
See, installing this protocol does so much more than just manage fear. It fundamentally changes your entire relationship with it. It activates that observer inside you, and it turns you from a spectator into the architect of your own life.
And let's be totally clear about something. This is not about becoming fearless. Fear is a feature of your high-resolution mind. It's not a bug. You can't just get rid of it, and you shouldn't even try. The goal is to recontextualize it, to see the alarm for what it really is, just a faulty signal from an outdated system, not some prophecy of your impending doom. This one sentence just captures the entire idea perfectly. We spend so much energy fixated on the small, skittering fears we can see right in front of us.
the spiders, that we completely miss the massive silent threat that's actually approaching, the rising tide of a life we're not living.
That high-resolution mind of yours is a gift. It's meant for greatness, not to keep you paralyzed and shivering in a corner. By using this protocol, the choice finally becomes yours. You can keep that powerful vision of yours focused on the spiders, or you can turn it toward the horizon. So, the question is, what will you choose to see?